Ergonomics is the center of every good workplace. Explore how that means more than just your keyboard as experts examine health, safety, and deficiencies on the job. You're listening to Work Factors on Texas A&M Health Talk. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is episode 4 I'm going 4, right? I feel like it's 4. We're going with 4.
Commit.
Yeah, it's 4, episode 4 of Work Factors. Just a little side note, I kind of feel like TexAct Radio there. You know, when they start off, they always say it's episode 2165. We're episode 4, but hey, we'll get to 2165 eventually. So I'm your host, Adam Pickens, as always, my co-host, Martha Parker.
Howdy.
So today we are very happy to have with us Dr. Stephanie Payne. So Dr. Payne, if you would, give us a brief introduction, a little bit about yourself. We're here to talk about, good gracious.
Industrial and organizational psychology?
No, that's where she's from. We're safety climate. We're here to talk about safety climate. So Dr. Payne, you can kind of see the way the podcast goes a little bit. So
you are your own advocate in
yes.
this whole deal.
Got it. All right. Very good. Well, thanks for having me. So I am a professor here at Texas A&M in the psychology department. My area of expertise or discipline within psychology is called industrial organizational psychology, which is a mouthful. It's kind of the blending of business and psychology. And I have a program of research on workplace safety that has been pretty active since about 2004 or so the last 11 years, give or take. And I've been fortunate to be able to partner with a lot of oil and gas companies, given that we're so close to Houston, and explore this underlying kind of concept of safety climate, safety culture, which is often how it's referred to in practice.
So you've been at A&M for 11 years?
I've actually been at A&M since 2000, so
wow.
about 20.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize you'd been here that long. Wow.
We all feel super young.
I know.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's great.
It was funny, the other day I was talking to somebody and I mentioned that I've been here since 2008, so I'm going on 11 years now. And
that makes,
11 years?
That makes 12. It's
what?
2020, buddy.
Oh,
yeah.
Dad,
so much for my math either.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been here, I'm going on 12 years now.
Uh-huh.
It's the blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't even think about it.
No. That's because we have the best jobs ever.
That's right. Every day is fun.
So I will have to tell you, Stephanie, every time I abbreviate industrial organizational psychology, it's I/O, right?
Right.
And I always think of input output, and then I go,
course.
whoa, that's not it.
Oh,
That's
yes.
not it.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I've thought that in the past.
Every single time. And I go,
Input, output psychologist.
yes.
Input, output, second. Yeah, I have to catch
that?
myself on that one.
No.
So, Stephanie, I'm glad we've got you on because we were looking forward to this. Martha and I have been talking about this for a while because safety, climate, culture is such a big topic right now. You know, it's been for a while, but I think we were talking about it the other day, and it kind of is similar to not in practice, but similar in a safety perspective way from the layperson's idea of what behavior-based safety was a few years ago. It's a term that a lot of people have heard of, but maybe not have a good grasp of.
And they throw it around.
Of course.
They throw it around
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, that's safety culture. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, I know. But it turns out that actually in my discipline, we have been studying organizational culture for over 50 years. And we have scientifically defined this construct. We've come up with a way of measuring it, and we put a little more boundaries around it rather than just kind of throwing the kitchen sink at anything human related. Yeah. So there is a science to this, and I'm excited that I've had the opportunity to contribute to it. I think we've helped to move that discipline further forward, and while there is a component of it that is about what are humans doing in the workplace to a certain extent, it's not quite as broad as people have a temptation to kind of make it.
Right.
You know?
So with that being said, this I think you said it really well. It's not quite as broad as everybody thinks it is. So in practice, give us a few sentence structural definition of safety culture, safety climate.
Yeah. So let me.
And are they different?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
that was a bullet point for later. Thank you.
That's all right.
Jumping the gun on that
Might
one.
as well go ahead and address that because there are days, honestly, that I'm like, oh, let's just use the terms interchangeably. It doesn't matter. But honestly, I have to be true to my discipline. And in psychology, we do make this distinction. And I have come to appreciate, honestly, in my collaborations with companies and so forth, that while it's kind of this psychobabble distinction, it actually has some application and real world distinction as well. So we'll start with safety culture. We tend to think of culture as more about beliefs and assumptions and underlying values, and they tend to be kind of deeper, right? And so if you have a safety culture that's oriented in a good way, it means that you have strong beliefs about the importance of safety. You really value safety, and you're doing everything you can to perpetuate that, right, in the workplace. And psychologists think that exists, but it's much deeper. It's much harder to kind of measure, and it's harder to change and so forth. And so because of that being so kind of deep-rooted, I think in part, we've also talked about safety climate, which is analogous to an organizational climate. So we talk about organizational culture and organizational climate. Likewise, we can talk about safety culture and safety climate. And so safety climate, we think, is a little bit more at the surface level. Really, it's about every organization has rules when it comes to being safe, right? So they have policies, practices, procedures. And so how employees perceive those procedures and how much those things are enforced, that's what safety climate is, right? And so there's a lot of layman kind of descriptions of or definitions of safety climate as things like, how do we do things around here? And I think that does really capture it, but that's also pretty broad, right? What do you mean by how do we do things around here? Well, let's dig a little further, right? I'm supposed to wear my hard hat or my steel-toe boots in this environment. To what extent do people tolerate if I don't do that, right? That's where I think safety climate really is kind of where the rubber hits the road, right? That's where we can kind of really point to it and say, this is what we mean by that. You're supposed to do this, but here's what really happens, right? And so another definition is kind of how we do things around here, but even more so when nobody's looking, right? And that really kind of starts to get at a little bit more of the deep-rooted aspect of culture and climate, and it gets at the idea that to what extent do I know what I'm supposed to do, and how much can I get away with deviating from that? And it's not to say that people are consciously making an effort to deviate per se, as much as just every organization has rules, and how much those are hard and fast and enforced is what characterizes this whole notion of kind of climate across organizations.
It's interesting. I think a lot of times for me, who is not a climate or culture person, I read the research, but a lot of the times what I see is the research kind of lines up with what I, as more of a safety professional, do in leading indicators.
Okay.
You measure a lot of different things, and I think to your point, there's a lot of things of this is how we do it, but there's a difference between this is how we say we do it and this is how we actually do it.
Yep.
And how willing are organizations to allow deviation from the book, so to speak. I've talked to a lot of different people in a lot of different fields, and certain fields are more capable of allowing that deviation.
Sure, exactly.
And both from the positive and the negative side, right? So there's negative deviation, which is like I'm really breaking the rules because I know I'm breaking the rules, and then there's positive deviation, which is like this rule is dumb and it's I need to do the right thing.
Yeah, the rule is, and we talked about this with Dr. Paris whenever we had Camille on.
Nice.
How much does the procedure or the rule or whatever it is, how much does that facilitate actually getting the job done well and getting it done safely, versus how much of it is just getting in my way?
Right.
you know, and I think a lot of that plays into the culture and climate of an organization.
It does. I mean, it kind of gets into the issue of like rules. Why do we have rules, and you know, and reasons for people for deviating and things like that. But when we're talking about climate, it is also about this, and this is where that I think you can make the distinction actually be meaningful in day-to-day practice of the distinction of culture versus climate. So we have these rules written on paper, right? And so to a certain extent, we're starting to kind of talk about the culture, because this is what we said we want to happen. But then to what extent does it actually happen? So it's the walking the talk kind of idea, right? Is where we get into the climate. And, you know, I think I'm hesitant to get into too much about kind of like dumb rules per se. But they
very,
do
very
exist,
technical.
right?
We study that all the time.
Do you? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But you know, I think that for the most part, you know, organizations put rules in place because they think it's the right thing to do, right? They think that and sometimes there's, you know, a lot of scientific evidence to support that this is the safest way to do this particular, you know, task and so forth. So, you know, I don't want to bash rules in general. I think they're there and they have their purpose. But when we're trying to understand kind of all the things that contribute to people's behavior in the workplace, this notion of kind of a climate and the idea of how much we enforce the rules and so forth, it turns out it has a really big impact on how people behave. So. And there's lots of empirical evidence, so data collected across multiple organizations and lots of different environments and so forth that really supports that safety climate predicts injuries in the workplace, whether people are following the rules, how safe they feel, and so forth. So, and one point I want to make real quick is just that that in practice, people tend to use the phrase safety culture. So at least in terms of in the oil and gas industry in particular, and also even in the health industry, I've dabbled a little bit with the medical industry and so forth, that there's a temptation to kind of use that phrase. It kind of just sticks. And so that's when I don't worry so much about making these distinctions, because that's just, you'll certainly see even in the research literature, a lot of people have used that phrase. But it turns out that probably whenever they've attempted to measure it, they're probably kind of getting more at that surface level. You know.
Well, so you've mentioned measurement a couple of times.
Yeah.
I always rely back on my framework of knowledge, as we all do. And so a lot of times in leading
that is a very fancy way to say you know what you know.
Yeah, you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know.
Framework of knowledge.
Yeah.
You're very fancy.
I am an academic, and I can't stop myself sometimes.
That's great.
I am Adam Pickens from DeKalb, Texas, but I'm also Adam Pickens academic, and so it just kind of seeps in.
You have a framework of knowledge.
Yeah. So
just checking.
As I think about some of the things that I've done, and both in academia and in the real world, the measurement is the key. You know, if you're not measuring what you want to measure, you might as well not even measure it.
Exactly.
So what are some successful things that you can go and do in either survey development or feedback loops or whatever for measurement of I guess really climate? You know,
sure. Right, exactly. That's the phrase I would use. So we rely extensively on surveys, and I know that there's a fair amount of survey fatigue out there, and anybody can put together a survey. So you know, I recognize the limitations and the challenges with any given survey. But if you keep in mind that ultimately climate is about employees' perceptions and about, you know, what they see and how, you know, to what extent, if I don't wear my steel-toe boots, what happens, right? Then you really kind of have to get their perceptions. And how do you get their perceptions? You got to talk to people. You either, surveys just allow for us to get a lot of data from a lot of employees at once, right? You can sit down and do interviews. You can do focus groups. But I think that historically, and there's at least in the research literature, we tend to rely extensively on surveys. And there is definitely a science to doing a good survey, right? And so while anybody can do one, I think that, you know, writing the right items and checking on your psychometric properties, which is the psychobabble for things like, you know, reliability and validity and accuracy, consistency, so forth. So there's a lot of work there that can facilitate making sure that the survey is implemented properly and gets good data for you, right? But that's contingent on people filling it out in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So there's one of the biggest, you know, challenges sometimes with survey research it comes across your desk or somebody hands it to you and you may or may not fill it out. How seriously do you take it, right? And so your data are only as good as the data that are presented in that survey. So
can that also be a measure of the safety climate?
Well, that's
like
fascinating.
The acceptance rate of taking one.
Yeah, I think that says something for sure. I have to acknowledge that the companies that allow me to come in and do a survey in the first place suggest that they probably they're not as scared of the results per se. They're eager to get that information. And there have been times that companies have turned me away, or their legal department has said, "No, thanks, we really don't want to have that information," and that probably tells you something right there, right?
Yeah. And we've worked with some clients who have tried to reward their employees for taking a survey.
Sure.
Does that, do you think, impacts the results of those surveys of safety climate in a positive or negative way, or do you know yet?
Sure. Well, there's a ton of research out there on getting people to fill out surveys in general, whether it's about safety or something else. And I can say that the majority of that research is supports incentivizing, right?
Okay.
So in general, people are more likely to fill out the survey if an incentive is offered. It is a little bit different in an organizational setting where you're asking your employees to fill out a survey. On the one hand, I tend to assume that they are able to do that during their work time, so we're not necessarily asking them to go above and beyond and do this on your afternoon off. But that said, there's also the broader context of concerns about whether this data, who's going to get this data, is it going to identify or get anybody in trouble, some of that kind of stuff. So sometimes people are apprehensive about being even honest when filling out the survey. The incentivizing thing, I think, we know it increases response rates. Okay. It may or may not necessarily lead to increases in quality, right?
A truer survey.
Yeah, exactly. So you can get people to respond, but whether or not that data is a good quality data is debatable about their level of trust and, a comfort level with reporting, whether the survey is anonymous, starts to get into more of the details about kind of the administration of the survey. So
can you give us some examples of questions that would be on a safety climate survey at a just general organization?
Yeah. One of the core components of safety climate is about management commitment to safety. So sometimes questions will be literally that. So, usually it's on agreement scale. So my manager or my supervisor is committed to safety, or people who need training is another component. Are given the training that they need to do their job safely. So often questions oriented around that. A lot of times it's about the supervisor, because I think the supervisor is the one who's enforcing the rules, and it's oftentimes about what's happening within a given work group, because the supervisor can set the tone, right? You can have a situation where you have one work group where the supervisor is pretty hard-nosed about the rules, and another one that kind of looks the other way, and so you can kind of start to see even differences in climate within one organization, but across work groups.
Mm-hmm. That's
No, go ahead.
Well, and that's been my experience too, is that first line supervisor has a lot more influence than all of us want to believe.
It's true,
right?
Yeah.
We want to work with the employees. We want to train the employees. We want to make sure that they do things, quote, right and safe. Mm-hmm. But we forget that very next line. Yeah. And I've been involved in organizations where you can totally tell, and the supervisors either they become a supervisor because they have prowess from a technical aspect, they're the best, button pusher. And so because they're the best button pusher, they're going to be the supervisor of all the button pushers. Well, we don't necessarily give them any training on how to be a supervisor, right? They're a great button pusher, but that's the really weak link in a lot of organizations. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you see those differences even within a small group between supervisors. Uh-huh. One that relishes the role and is a great manager of people and supervisor of people versus just a good technical button pusher.
Yeah.
And I bet that would be amazing to see in the results of those climate surveys.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very much a big part of it. And I think you're right. I mean, I think that this is a fundamental issue that we have in organizations of promoting people that are amazing at their job, but may not be ready to be a supervisor.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say something very similar to that. I've worked in organizations. We as the Ergo Center have worked in organizations to where there is a perception of organizational commitment, but then there is a work group commitment. And oftentimes it's been my experience that those two things don't always line up.
Right. Either on they're negatively or positively. Like the organization is like super committed, and then the supervisor's not, and vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's where that possible disconnect kind of occurs. And I think that's actually the most dangerous situation, right? When the organization's saying safety, 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 and then, but here's what really happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, but I from my time in industry, I often think back to something like that. If the organization is really saying safety, 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 but then at the work group level, it's not, that's got to lead me to believe that the organization isn't really safety, safety, safety.
True.
Or that's been my experience anyway, because I long story short, I've worked in jobs like that where the organization says safety's number one. We're, great, great, great. And then at the organization, at the workload level, the supervisors are like, you get the product done. I don't care about safety, and so therefore stepping back from that now, the organization really wasn't committed to safety, because if they were, they would have had supervisors in place that understood that balance between safety, keeping, good quality workers doing a good quality job, and getting good product out. It's a really interesting balance of how committed are you really?
Right.
And I think within the past 15 years, it's changed. You don't see a lot of organizations that now say safety first, right? Because everybody called BS on that.
Yeah.
Right. And so now they say, production first, or safely, production first, but safe, or whatever. And so it rings a little bit truer, I think, to the employee when they go, oh, okay, yep, our job is to make the widgets.
Well done.
Make the widgets. We try to work in widgets at every podcast. My job is to make the widgets, but I need to do it safely, because my company tells me my job is to make the widgets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that challenge between production and safety is kind of keeps me up at night.
Okay, that's sad.
I know.
Okay,
well,
sorry. I mean, it's good.
I want to reconcile it, right? I want to fix it, and and I think
do you have any magic pills for that?
I wish silver bullet. There's a part of me that says you cannot be productive unless you are safe, right? So I feel like you absolutely have to put safety first. But then there's the part of me that also says, like, it's in the day-to-day activities. That's where we kind of explain this, is that short-term versus long-term, right? Long-term, you absolutely have to be safe in order to be productive. But every once in a while, in the day-to-day activities, it's tempting to kind of take that shortcut, right? And so, that's where things kind of go awry a little bit.
Yeah, we a couple of years back, we had a contract with a company that will remain nameless that made, let's say, widgets, and their short term was, we're so far behind in production that we have to do whatever we have to do. We want to be committed to safety. That's why they had us there. But their production was 9 months behind, and it was in an industry where you couldn't be 9 months behind.
Right.
And they had a turnover rate that was just astronomical. It's the highest I've ever seen. I mean, I don't think they kept people more than 3 months or something.
Sure.
And so, they fought this balance of, I want to keep my workers safe so that they can get to the level
they can be here.
Yeah, producing really good widgets so that we can get out of this hole that we're in.
Yeah.
But I need them to do whatever they need to do to get it done as fast as they can get it done right this second. I think this short-term versus long-term view is oftentimes really difficult based upon, a lot of more factors than I can possibly imagine right now.
Sure.
One of my favorite stories as an ergonomist was, and I, as a consultant, I did mainly office ergonomics. And so I got this call on like 2 or 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And, I'm a consultant. I'm working on Friday afternoon, which is amazing. But at the time I was working, and they said, we need you to come do an emergency ergonomic evaluation. And I said, okay, help me understand what's an emergency ergonomic evaluation. And they said, we need this guy's having like forearm pain or shoulder pain or something, and it's really bad, but he's working a double shift this weekend. And so we need to like fix this. And I was like, okay. I said, I can't, and I really did have something else to do. And I said, I can't be there this afternoon. I can be there first thing Monday morning, but I cannot be there this afternoon. Well, can you come on Saturday? No, can't come on Saturday. And it was amazing and after I talked him down off the ledge, like, if he's in that much pain, he probably shouldn't be working a double this weekend. Like, mashing a mouse button, if it hurts him now, it's going to hurt him worse on Sunday. So don't make him do it. Oh, well, I guess we didn't think about that. And it was they were like trying to follow the rules, because the rules said when you have an employee that is in discomfort, you call your ergonomist and they come in here and, sprinkle the pixie dust and everybody gets magically better. So that's what they were doing, right. But they hadn't stepped back to think about the individual and, like, does this even make sense, right? And so that's where I think the culture that said, we really care about our people, we're going to get professionals in here to take care of them, worked, but it didn't work from a does this even make sense perspective. Yeah, it was crazy. It was fun though. Yeah, it was fun to tell them, no, I'm sorry, there's no such thing as an ergonomic emergency.
But there was to them.
There was to them, 100%. Yeah. It was all their perception.
So, we touched on the measurement, but I kept thinking about this leading into this. You've talked about survey fatigue. I think that's a very real thing, and I think we all as faculty members and staff members get a lot of surveys from a lot of different organizations, and I like to fill out surveys because I understand response rates are really low. But even I, as somebody who likes to do
the right
thing, I still get tired of it.
Of course.
And so how do you work the balance of surveying regularly? And, one of the things we see in leading indicators research is you have to have that closed loop. You got to see somebody doing something with the data that you collect.
Absolutely.
How do y'all balance that?
Well, that's my first recommendation to anybody about doing a survey is, like, you can't collect the data and then not do anything with it, right? You owe it to your employees to, at a minimum, communicate back that you've read the responses, you've aggregated the information, you've looked at it, and you're considering it, right? And without that communication, that closing the loop, right, you're never going to get people to respond again in the future, or take it seriously, and all that stuff. So that's a critical piece for sure. I think that one of the challenges that we don't have a good answer for from a scientific standpoint is kind of how frequently do we need to be conducting surveys? And this is actually a question that some of my colleagues and I embraced and were really curious about. We kind of thought about it as the shelf life of a survey, right? So if I pick up a survey that occurred, 6 months ago, is this still valid? Is it still, informative to me? Or 6 years ago, can I go with that? And of course, it's a function of whether people have turned over, how much has changed within the organization. But scientifically, we don't have a lot of data that speaks to that. Because to really answer that question, I think for me, it would be the perfect scenario would be we would collect a whole bunch of survey data. Let's say we administer in an organization a survey every month or something like that, right? Then we could kind of work backwards to figure out how many can I take away, right? To see, look, we could have just done one at month 1 and one at month 12, right? Or, but we have to have the data to kind of pull it out and figure out what, how much did things change, and kind of determining what's the dependent variable here, right? So how do we determine that the data is useful to us? So we oftentimes take the questions that people responded to about safety climate and we correlate it to things like injuries that have occurred in the workplace. And so we can look at the prediction and how well are we predicting. And you probably, as I'm sure you guys are aware, that injuries in general, low base rate, challenging to predict in the first place. But if we have some correlation, maybe in months 1, 2, 3, then suddenly we lose our correlation. It's no longer significant. It's no longer kind of helping us see anything months 4, 5, 6. It kind of suggests, now the survey data is expired, right? It's time to get new survey data. And that's actually what we were able to show. So we did have one really large scale survey that we did with an organization that had multiple sites, and they weren't willing to let us administer multiple surveys, but what they were willing to do is give us access to their injury data and incident data, right, over the course of 2 years. And so we did take the survey and look to see, okay, how much did the survey data predict those injuries for us long term? And sadly, I think from a practical standpoint, we saw some decline in prediction after about 3 months. And so it's still a bit uncertain. I'm not ready to completely hang my hat on this, but I think that it suggests that things have changed enough in 3 months that we need to kind of reassess. But a really important caveat to all of that is that a survey doesn't have to be really long. So my temptation as a researcher is to throw everything into the survey, right? You know,
yes, to increase your framework of knowledge.
Yes,
yes,
100 plus items. But really, honestly, safety climate can be measured with about 8 items, give or take. You know,
that's
so
cool.
yeah, so we, you know, so now I think actually a lot of people in my field have actually started to embrace some what they call experience sampling methodology and modeling and so forth, where they might gather some data through your phone or on your, you know, like
smart
according to
device
my
or
watch.
wearable,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, a wearable device. And so, you know, you could administer 5 to 10 items real quickly over on your phone and move on, right? And so kind of a quick pulse check.
Yeah.
And depending on how large your organization is, it may be the case that not everybody has to respond. You just need a representative sample, right? So if you've got 1,000 people, if you can get 100 people to respond every month, you probably can get a good sense of kind of what's happening there.
So long story short, what I heard out of this was to know how many surveys you need to take more surveys.
Unfortunately, I think from a scientific standpoint, to answer that question, yeah.
It's again talking about a funny little loop you got going on there.
But what we found in one of the recent projects with the Ergo Center was we collected, 119 different computer measures of how much people were working on the computer, like 119 measures every 6 seconds or something. It was ridiculous. It was a lot of data for 10,000 people over 2 years or something, and it was ginormous. But what I think we found was like the first month and the last month were not different.
Wow.
So you could get all you needed in that first month.
There you go.
Because it was the same as the last month.
Yeah.
And
because as long as people don't know, for ours anyway, as long as people didn't know
Good job.
didn't know that they were being didn't know that they were being watched. Like the data collection just happened in the background.
Right.
They just worked. And so we, that was what we found. And
but it was a lot of data, which is your point. Is you got to have a lot of data to be able to figure out what you can take away and have the results still be.
And because you
valid.
did that, now you can feel confident about saying, look, we've done it, we've looked, we know, right?
Yeah, that was what we found. We, we I don't know, 160 different measures.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was just ridiculous. Yeah. But really, when it came down to it, I'm sure it's very similar to what you do. We had 5 or 6 that you actually used and were valid and really good and predicted good quality things that you wanted to do.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So 8 questions you can measure safety climate. That's cool.
I like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So if ever I see a safety climate culture survey, I'm gonna be like, there's 12 questions. No.
It's 8 plus or minus.
Okay. Oh God.
There you go.
Well, Stephanie, I certainly appreciate your time. We're hitting our time mark. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Sure. I think this is a great discussion, and Martha and I go back and kind of look at these things later. We may want to have you back on again because I think there's so much more that we could talk about this.
Well, yeah. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that is like a burning desire?
Yeah,
like something you were just like, this is what I'm working on now, and it's awesome.
Ooh, oh gosh, put me on the spot. Yeah, I don't know.
You can always say no.
I can talk about this stuff all day long. So I think thinking about psychology of safety, right? Bringing psychology in and trying to understand people's behavior in the workplace. So. There's a number of things that we could reflect on or stories I could.
Well, we know that what you say and what you do keeps you up at night.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Now you know.
Now we know.
It is so funny because in the back of my mind this whole time, talking about stories and whatnot, I just finished listening to Call Sign Chaos, which is Jim Mattis's book on a streaming service that isn't our sponsor. And it was funny because he was talking about the difference between the Marine culture and like Army culture and how those two, like we could have a whole different podcast on this, but like if you're a company and you have subcontractors,
Oh, yes.
matching the subcontractor culture or just dealing with the different culture of a subcontractor when it varies from what your main organizational culture is. I think that would be a fascinating discussion.
Sure.
So
it's a real challenge for real
Yeah.
organizations. I mean, lots
Yeah.
and lots of contracting going on out there.
yeah, we may definitely have you back on for that. And
Right.
I say may definitely.
Yeah, which means definitely.
Okay. So that's the final thought for the day is look forward to podcast number 2 with Dr. Payne. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yes,
Martha?
great. It's going to be a great day.
It's going to be a great day.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode.
Episode 4. Out.
5 next.
4 is
Oh,
out.
I'm all
Texas
confused.
A&M
Health
Dadgummit.
Talk, a production of the Texas A&M University Health Science Center. Visit us on the web at vitalrecord.tamhsc.edu, where you'll find answers to all of your health questions. Until next time, stay healthy.